One of the problems with social media is that so many of us get our news stories in a sentence or two. It's fine for headlines, it's fine for snippets, but when a story is more detailed, when a story is more nuanced, like the Manchester City one, I'm afraid a tweet is just not going to cover it. So I've seen a lot of misinformation, a lot of people who don't fully understand what the situation is going on with Manchester City at the moment. And as I say, I think it's to be understood because, quite frankly, unless you're going to wade your way through the full report, which is going to be boring at best, or you're going to read a columnist in a newspaper, which, as we know, a lot of us don't anymore, you're really relying on somebody condensing it down to a sentence or two, as I say, which ain't going to do it very well at all. I think in terms of how this is going to impact West Ham, it's twofold. Initially, we've got the match against them. And from that point of view, it's probably a good thing. Guardiola is probably not even sure he's going to be working there anymore. They had a winter break, Manchester City. They're going to return back from it with a cloud hanging over them. Players, big players for them, like Raheem Sterling and Kevin De Bruyne, are probably going to have their minds cast elsewhere. Do I think they're professional players, world-class players? Yes. But do I think that they're going to be wondering where they're playing their football next season? Absolutely, 100%. If you think for a moment that those players, and I only use those two as an example, you can pick any number of their squads, but if you think any of those players haven't been on the phone to their agents as soon as they heard the news that UEFA had imposed a 2-year Champions League ban and a whopping great fine on them, then you'd be very much mistaken. Of course they're on the phone to their agents. Basically, either getting their agents to contact the club to get some legal clarity. They can't have any legal clarity at the moment because Manchester City have appealed the ruling. So either to get some clarity or to say to their agents, "Oi, get me out of here. I don't want to be here very often." But that in itself is going to pose them some problems, which I'll go on to cover in a second. But in terms of us playing the game against them, maybe that does benefit us playing Manchester City because it's going to help. They're such a brilliant team. If their whole squad of their players have their mind 90% on the job, all right, look, small margins, but in a professional game of football, playing at 90% is sometimes not enough. Are we going to have a motivated Guardiola? It's a funny one, really, because motivation comes from a funny place. You can often prove people wrong and use motivation. So if you're annoyed, if someone you feel has wronged you, then that may well motivate you and you go out and prove them wrong. But Guardiola's not got to prove anybody wrong. This is not, he can't exact any retribution on the UEFA rulers. That is going to be something that the Abu Dhabi-based club are going to have to do through the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So I just think, basically, in a nutshell, I don't think their mind will be on the job. Are they still good enough to beat us? Absolutely. They're good enough to put 5 or 6 past us. Will they be in the correct mindset to do that? I'm not so sure. Well, I'd certainly hope so. We've had 5-6 days off the players have had with their families, which I thought was a good idea. We come back, we've had a load of training. Well, we'll have had 4 or 5 days training. New players, as I've said before on these very videos. And that, my friends, is what happens when you buy a cheap tripod off eBay, and not the, you try and save a few pence and your camera pops off. Anyway, where was I? We've taken a few days off. We come back refreshed and my point is we should be 100% on it. We're going to be motivated for the game. We're up for the game. They're going to be full of self-doubt. They've got the Champions League coming up. Are they going to be concentrating on it? Well, I guess they have to. They can't win the league now because Liverpool have just beaten Norwich. So mathematically, yes, but I think they know it's over. If they're going to stick 2 fingers up to anyone, it's going to be to make it awkward for UEFA by winning the Champions League. And I think for a lot of these players, it's going to be their last hurrah unless the appeal is successful. But the appeal does not happen until June or July. So here's the issue for Manchester City long term, and it does, in a roundabout, long-winded sort of way, and I will get to it in the end if you want to stick with it, have an impact on West Ham and clubs like West Ham, which is the ruling from UEFA. Now, let's get one thing right. City have fallen foul of the rules. No doubt about it at all. In 2014, they were found guilty of financial irregularities by FIFA Financial Fair Play. FIFA Financial Fair Play. Obviously, UEFA being one of the underlings of FIFA will then process that and incorporate that into the European game. But Man City fell foul of it. They got kicked out of all European competition. Now, what happened was City made a deal. I think it's the best way to put it. City made a deal with UEFA, and in return for not kicking them out, they paid a fine. I think it was about 50 million quid, and were told that they must not get into this sort of trouble again. They must not. They've got to adhere to every single UEFA regulation. That was a deal in 2014. They cut a deal with UEFA. That was why they stayed in the Champions League, and they paid 50 million. It was a financial fine instead. So they have fallen foul of what they agreed. So that was their chance. So now we're into this situation. To put it into the most simplistic terms I can, City don't have any debt. City are a mega rich club, unlike Manchester United, who are saddled with debt. The Glazers, for instance, purchased Manchester United without using their own money. They secured money on Manchester United. They borrowed money, basically, to buy Manchester United. They haven't used their own money. So Manchester United was saddled with debt, remains saddled with debt. Manchester City don't have any debt because they are owned by an oil-rich country, basically. It's as simple as that. Well, I say it's as simple as that. It's not. In order for them to... Now, basically, Manchester City could buy any of the players they wanted. They really could. Manchester City could go and buy Lionel Messi should they want to. They can't go and buy Lionel Messi. Why? Because the financial fair play rules stop them from doing it. Basically, you have to have enough income to be able to spend money on these players. I think you can upgrade your stadium. That doesn't count. But player purchases have to be covered through regular football income. Your television deal, what you're taking through the turnstiles, and your sponsorship. And this is where the problems have come in. Now, because Sheikh Mansour can't just say, well, yeah, here's $500 million. Buy all the players you want. You can't do that anymore. Let's get something very, very clear here. The reason you can't do that is they brought it in so as nobody could do a Portsmouth, so as nobody could do a Leeds. It was meant to be brought in to protect unscrupulous owners coming in, bleeding a club dry and leaving a club bankrupt. It was never really meant to be made for a mega rich oil state. It's just basically they're using that rule as a means to punish them. Basically, City won't be in trouble. Manchester City as a club won't cease to exist in the way that Portsmouth are at risk of doing it and stuff like that. It's very, very different. But anyway, those are the rules and they're going to implement them. So basically, it looks like, allegedly, I must say, of course, that City have cooked the books. That City have made out they get more sponsorship, more advertising revenue than they actually do. Of course, the TV deal is quite transparent. Anybody can see it. We all know what everybody gets. I think they got 100 million from the Champions League last year. As we know, I think the TV deal with Sky and BT, the domestic TV deal, is worth about 150 million. To clubs, which you know from ourselves, I think what comes in through the turnstile is relatively easy to extrapolate. Are you still there? Have you fallen asleep yet? I don't blame you if you have. So the only way that they can maybe get anything under the radar is through their sponsorship. Now, a lot of their sponsorship comes from the Middle East, basically, and it's been seen to be let's say normally a sponsorship deal would only yield 30 million. This sponsorship deal might yield 100 million, for example. And that new 100 million deal, which everybody else only get 30 million from, it is coming from a Middle Eastern company who is known to be friendly and sympathetic to Sheikh Mansour. There was even, and I probably should have it down here, but I don't have my laptop with me. I think there was a company who it was said that they were sponsoring Manchester City to the tune of 60 million. Actually, they only paid 10. and Sheikh Mansour topped it up by 50. So really it wasn't a sponsorship deal. Basically, they were cooking the books in that sense. Naughty, yes. A breach of the rules, which they agreed to adhere to, absolutely. But what it does do, and this is where it might be bad for football and particularly bad for West Ham, and I'll get it's a bit tenuous, but in the long run, is it stops anybody else coming up and competing with the top clubs. So, for instance, Manchester United can be saddled with debt, but that's allowed. Yet Manchester City, the way they're doing things, is not allowed, even though they're not putting the club at risk at all. It's a very, very odd one. So if you look at this situation, what it's actually stopped is somebody like Roman Abramovich couldn't come in and buy a club now. He couldn't come in and do what he's done with Chelsea. Somebody like Sheikh Mansour couldn't come in and do what he's done with Manchester City, because actually I think he bought the club possibly in 2008. I might be wrong on that, but he managed to get in and boost the club financially before the drawbridge was pulled up. If you remember, I don't know if you remember, Mark Hughes was manager at the time. Do you remember on transfer deadline day, there with his arm around Robinho? He couldn't believe it. Honestly, he really couldn't believe it. They bought a load of players. It elevated their status. They got up in and amongst the Champions League clubs because they had that elevated status. They were allowed to, they enabled them to attract Mancini. They paid high wages. Pellegrini came in. And then obviously finally Guardiola. And they were able to sign players like Sergio Aguero and some of the world's best players. Not only were they able to sign them, they were able to keep them by paying them massive, massive wages. I do believe Raheem Sterling has just signed a new contract which yields well over £350,000 a week, I believe. The point is, anybody coming in now, what it does, it sort of kills the dream of anybody coming in and just ploughing money in and turning somebody into a super club, because you just can't do that. You could be the richest man in the world, but you couldn't buy West Ham and think, I'm going to take them and take them into European football, because the moment you tried to stick your head above the parapet, the moment you try to invest any more than they deem you to be worth, then you're shackled, really. You're absolutely shackled by it. So you're not going to attract that super rich investor, because even if he does come in, he can't say, there you go, there's 400 million, that's a transfer budget. You wouldn't be allowed to spend it. You can't inflate, as we've seen, you can't inflate the sponsorship deal to do that. I think West Ham's sponsorship deal with Betway is number 7th in the league. I think we get something like 30 million or something like that. But it's actually betting companies are not the best example for sponsorship for this argument, because a betting company are often listed offshore. They're in Gibraltar, they're in the Cayman Islands. It's very difficult to find out who actually owns betting companies. But let's say it was Greg's Pasties or something like that. It was very easy to see who the owner of that is. But if it then became clear that the new owner of West Ham had a vested interest in Greg's Pasties, we'd be in trouble. Everybody would be in trouble, and that's basically what's happened to Manchester City. So you can't just come in and elevate your status there. So what does that mean? Well, actually, it means if a super rich person's not going to come in, what are we going to get? Well, we're going to get an investor. What's an investor want? Obviously, some profit on their investment. And if what you want is profit on the investment, then you're going to run a very, very tight ship. What you really want is the money to come back. You want the interest payments. You want to elevate the club to a status and then sell it on again. You're not going to propel it and turn it into superstar status. And particularly if you just become an unattractive proposition from that way. And I just wonder where it's all going with this, because you look at Manchester City and Guardiola's going to leave, isn't he? Surely he's going to be off. Just can't be anything else that's going to happen there. Someone like Raheem Sterling. Well, here's the interesting thing, actually, as far as City's concerned. Let's say Manchester United want to buy Raheem Sterling. I know it probably won't happen in that sense, but let's say that does happen. Everybody knows that Manchester City are not in a position of strength. Do they need the money? No. But to make sure they don't fall foul of financial fair play rules at some point in the future, they're going to have to get the best money that they can for Raheem Sterling. Raheem Sterling might be worth 100 million, let's say. Manchester United can offer 70 and probably get him as well. Not only that, Manchester United may well insist that Manchester City pay a portion of his wages because they've got such high inflated wages. It could happen with Kevin De Bruyne, it could happen with anyone. My point is, you may well find that some of Manchester City's players' wages are so high that they can't shift them. So actually, the very process of punishing them and expelling them from European football, which will cost them another 100 million, may well see them fall foul of financial fair play again, even at a point where they may well be trying to get it right. It's complicated. It's crazy. I should probably say at this point, this video is of course sponsored by the One Football app. It's downloadable from the link below. Go straight to your phone. You can tailor it to just get West Ham news. And I've got to be honest with you, even that app or anything like it is probably not going to have the level of detail that you're going to need to know to sort through something like this. But here's the one. What they've done is they've fallen foul of UEFA and FIFA international financial fair play. If it turns out to be true that they have cooked the books and they are banned from European football for next season, it looks like it's 2 seasons, they're going to lose 100 million a year. Once that happens, that's going to come straight off of their balance sheet. What's going to happen then? They're going to fall foul of the domestic financial fair play. You hear our owners going on about it quite a lot, don't you? The domestic version of it. I think they've probably fallen foul of it already. So all we've seen thus far is the UEFA version of what's gone on. What we've not seen yet is how they're going to be punished domestically. Now, UEFA's run by committee, basically. The Premier League's something very different. The Premier League is, there's no... It's not like the Wizard of Oz. There's not somebody behind the curtain winding it all round, making the smoke and mirrors and making it all go around. The Premier League, quite clearly, is the 20 member clubs. They meet and they decide upon stuff. For them to make a decision, 14 of the 20 have to vote, to ratify a vote. Now, I don't know what would happen if the 20 clubs came together. Would 14 of them vote to implement sanctions upon Manchester City? They can do all types of things. They can give them a 3-point deduction, something like that. Would that impact Manchester City? No, it wouldn't. Why? Because, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If they're not finishing first, it doesn't actually matter whether they finish second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth or seventh. It doesn't matter. Because the top 4 doesn't matter to them anymore because they're not going to qualify for Europe. So would they do that? No. Are they going to find them more money? Probably wouldn't matter either. But what the nuclear option with all of this is, and I do believe it's the recommended one, is you get relegated. But you don't just get relegated to you don't just get relegated to the Championship. As I understand it, you go to the bottom of the pyramid. I've seen people suggest that might in some way help West Ham because there will only be 2 relegation places left. I think the worries for football are far greater than that. It's crazy. It's an absolutely crazy situation. I've skimmed over the surface. You see why it's not really doable in a tweet. Anyway, we face them on Wednesday. What's their mindset going to be? I think pretty poor. Have we got a chance? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine.